If you are familiar with Virgil's writings or just the very famous words, the gates of hell are open night and day, smooth is the descent and easy is the way. But to return and watch the cheerful skies, therein the task and mighty labor lies, or in a more simplistic manner, the descent to hell is easy but to return is extremely difficult, then you are already familiar with the central idea behind R.F. Kuang's Katabasis. Hello and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I shall be discussing with you in detail Katabasis by R.F. Kuang, which is set to be released in August 2025. In Katabasis, Kuang introduces us to a world which is very similar to our own, except for one crucial difference. This is a world that runs on magic, and in this world, you can get a degree in magic as easily as you can get a degree in history, geography, or English. And after getting said degree, you can move to a cushy academia job, or you can get an industry job which has job security and even pays well. But our protagonists, Alice Law and Peter Mudrock, are not interested in academia jobs or even industry jobs. What they are interested in is becoming the greatest magicians that the world has ever seen, and to do so, they need the help of their brilliant advisor, Professor Jacob Grimes. The only issue is that Jacob Grimes is deceased. He's dead with a capital D. And to get his advice and fulfill their goals, Alice and Peter are hell-bent on getting Jacob Grimes back from hell itself. In Kuang's novel, magic is abstract and concrete. It is as logical as mathematics and as language-oriented as linguistics. It is finite and infinite. To put it very simply, in this novel, magic itself is a paradox. Kuang has a very unique take on magic. Unfortunately for both her and the reader, her uniqueness does not always translate to good storytelling. I think Katabasis is a book that is going to be a hit or a miss for a majority of people. You will either love it or you will hate it. You will be polarized in your opinions about this novel. But for the very few, you will be stuck in the middle just as I am, unable to truly form your opinions about this book, because this is a book that you have to treat with a little more kindness than usual and with a lot of nuance. So let's start right off with it, straight from the prose. The prose in this novel is very different from how Kuang has written in the Poppy War trilogy, even in Yellowface or Babel. That is not to say that the writing style is bad, it is just to say that perhaps Kuang is not well versed in utilizing the writing style. The style of Katabasis is very similar to the style you might find in humorous satirical fantasy, such as the likes of Terry Pratchett in the Discworld series, which if you have never tried, I highly recommend them. But the thing is, this is a kind of style that demands the author to toe the very fine line between being self-critical and self-referential and overtly self-indulgent. Unfortunately, Kuang kind of leans towards the latter. Her jokes don't often land as she wanted them to, because to be very honest, the average reader, especially the average non-American reader, probably does not care enough about the intricacies of the American college system or the American Ivy League system to know why Dartmouth may not be considered an actual Ivy League school. And moreover, Kuang's jokes are only for herself and a very niche audience that might understand them. Though this is not the case throughout the novel, after a few chapters, you will eventually find yourself settled into the writing style, and Kuang does ease up on the not very funny jokes. I don't want to be mean, I just want to say, Kuang, please stop trying to be funny. You are not, and that is okay. Let's stick to serious fantasy instead of being humorous. Let's leave the humor to the other writers who can actually be funny. Now, let's talk about something that R.F. Kuang is really bad at: exposition. Katabasis, like its previous novels like Babel, pivots between info-dumping information that is not even needed and then subsequently withholding information that would highly enrich the reader's experience. The first few pages of this book are filled with academic dissertations on how magic works, how magic has changed their society and the importance of magic, and the next few chapters, which are set in hell, are again info dumps about how hell works, how hell is set up, and what different philosophers have to say about hell. There are pages and pages of explanations of theoretic frameworks like Ferdinand's Mobius strip or Schrodinger's cat or the sunk cost fallacy. Now, these are interesting to learn. I myself quite enjoyed reading the various ways she interpreted popular theories and then implemented them into the framework of her narrative. But after a point, you just want the story to progress. After a point, you get tired of being preached to like you are in a lecture hall and R.F. Kuang is your strict professor who knows exactly when you're going to doze off. The thing is, I have begun to find the critique that Kuang writes to seem intelligent a bit ridiculous because Kuang does not need to seem intelligent. She is an intelligent author, but the issue is that her intelligence does not always translate to good storytelling. When you strip away the paragraphs upon paragraphs of academic explanations and theories that seemingly add depth to the plot, what you're left with are the bare bones structures of a story that don't make sense when read without those needless paragraphs of info dumping. While we are on the topic of storytelling, the issue is that Kuang is a very imaginative author who employs her imagination in the most unimaginative ways. Like the description of hell in this book is so boring that I at times felt so incredibly frustrated that the potential in the setting of this novel was never truly exploited. Now, when we talk about novels that are so dependent upon the time, era, or the place that they are set in, you almost always expect the setting itself to play the role of a character, for it to influence the way the characters react to each other or to the overall narrative. Unfortunately, Kuang never seems to make peace with the fact. She never wants to develop hell out of what we already know or expect. Her viewpoint of hell and her depiction is hell is nothing different or special from what other writers have done in their works. Moreover, she actually does it in a boring, unimaginative, and often frustrating ways. I mean, this novel could have been set underwater for all I care, and it probably would not have made a difference, except she would probably reference some other oceanologists instead of the philosophers that she has. When we speak of things such as this, we are reminded of the fact that much of the story seems to be set in a vacuum. Like for the first 200 pages, you probably won't even notice that this novel is set in 1985 because the way the characters speak and behave seems very akin to the modern age than it does to something that was around more than 20 years earlier. Everything about this novel exists in a vacuum. Our main characters exist in a vacuum, hell exists in a vacuum, and even magic exists in a vacuum. We never truly see how magic has impacted the world around them, how greatly it has changed things, and if it has existed from the beginning of the times, then how different is the world from the world that we, a magic-less society, live in. This is to say that Kuang has done nothing to humanize her story, to add in the little moments that make her world realistic and believable, for the reader to say, yeah, if magic was real, this is what our world would look like. Moving on, Kuang is abysmal at foreshadowing. Either she obsessively insists on foreshadowing things that are clear to the reader, or she refrains from using the literary device of foreshadowing at all. In a portion of this novel, the Zeno's paradox is used to solve a life or death situation. And the narrator insists upon saying that this is a huge deal because the Zeno's paradox is often overlooked for its simplicity and is only taught to undergraduates. But why should the average reader even care about the Zeno's paradox? It just feels anticlimactic to the reader that something such as a theory solved this very crucial life or death situation. Instead of springing it out of the blue, Kuang could have built up the Zeno's paradox in the very beginning of the novel. She could have included tidbits about how our main characters did not think of it as important or cast it aside because, again, it's simple and only taught to undergraduates, so the PhD students don't need to worry about something as simple as that. But no, Zeno's paradox is just brought out of the blue as a deus ex machina to solve a situation that seemed seemingly unsolvable prior to its introduction. It's almost like this novel is meant to be an application-based test for the reader so that Kuang can often go, quick, think of a theory and apply it to the situation and see if it can be solved. Now let's move on to character work. The characters were my favorite part of this novel. I really liked Alice Law and Peter Mudrock. I found them to be good characters in the way that they develop from the beginning of the novel to the end. They are well-rounded characters and they are very interesting in my opinion. I was actually kind of impressed with the way Kwang does characters in this novel because her character work in Babel and Yellowface was pretty bad. I felt particularly drawn towards Alice, though I didn't really see the chemistry that was between her and Peter that the narrator insisted existed. But my most loved point was the way that Alice was not a perfect character. She had her flaws and her flaws were treated with nuance, and the way women were treated in this novel was also quite good. Like, I don't really have any qualms with it, and it was one of the most interesting parts of the novel, so to say. But while we are on the topic of character work, I do have one issue, and that's with defamiliarization. To explain it in layman's term, defamiliarization is when writers take everyday mundane occurrences and give them a stylistic feel. So for instance, if I look at you or at myself in the mirror, I would say I have brown skin, black hair and brown eyes. But when a writer writes, they would say that my eyes are brown like wood, or that my skin seems sun-kissed, or that my hair is willowy like the branches of a tree. They make it seem poetic and more special than they actually are in reality. And that is what gives birth to this layer of separation between reality and fiction. What gives prose the stylistic feel and the power to turn mundane occurrences into something special, something new to the audience. Unfortunately, when someone makes excessive use of defamiliarization, it gives an artificial feeling to the novel, and that artificial feeling is unfortunately very present in Katabasis. This book kind of forgets how real people speak. No 8-year-old is going to say your charity is much appreciated to a classmate, except for maybe Sheldon Cooper, and even he is not a very nicely written character. The thing is, defamiliarization serves to decontextualize the novel and make it seem grey and bland, make it feel unnatural. The characters don't speak like real people do. No real person, no matter how intelligent, speaks strictly in theorems and academic concepts or frameworks that they are studying. Even people who are engaged in academia probably talk about their daily lives half of the time and only talk about their field of study when they are in a context that demands them to speak of the field of their study. But unfortunately, Peter or Alice seem to be only speaking in tongues, so to say. They don't really speak like real people. They speak about paradoxes and theories and concepts, and all of that seems to bog down the narrative and make it seem slow and uninteresting to the reader. Finally, let's talk about the plot, the depth of the novel, and other miscellaneous things. Unlike Babel, Katabasis is not a book with a lot of depth in its narrative or in its structures, and I think that is one of its strengths and not one of its weaknesses. Usually, Kwang wants to discuss so many things that she loses the track of her core discussion and ends up writing a novel that really does not seem to come together in the end. But in Katabasis, she keeps it simple. Her goal is to showcase the harrowing experiences of a marginalized person in academia and the predatory nature of men in positions of power. She also wants to critique the all or nothing mindset that young academics have that often drives them into the ground, and she does a great job with that. I have no complaints about it. But Kwang steadfastly maintains a myth of meritocracy with no critical comments or critical exploration of that matter. The narrative insists that both Peter and Alice strive upon meritocracy, and that is why they deserve the places at the table that they have been given, except for the one fact that they both come from extremely wealthy families. And this seems even more insipid and even more bitter when the primary negative character is the only one we see on page who comes from a lower income background. It's almost as if Kwang can discuss marginalization when it's race, gender, and even disability, but as soon as she has to critically examine the role wealth plays in marginalizing certain people and making academia inaccessible to them, her brain just comes to a screeching halt and she circles back to meritocracy and keeps on saying that if you are good enough, if you are meritorious, you will go far ahead. But often that is not how it works. Even people who are extremely good, even geniuses, they probably don't go as far in academia, especially in a subject such as literature, as Kwang herself has, unless they have the wealth to fund their studies. I mean, in the global south, especially in countries like India, Pakistan, or Bangladesh, the countries which neighbor China, the place of origin of the author herself, you probably don't even get to study an unprofessional subject such as English unless you have the wealth to do it, and you have the wealth to fund your higher education through institutions that will enable you to go as far ahead as Kwang has. And unfortunately, in novel after novel, Kwang refuses to examine her own beliefs. I mean, doesn't it seem a bit redundant to lecture other people and teach them, preach to them about how people are marginalized in certain ways in academia, when you yourself fail to understand that except for race, gender, or disability, there is another intersection that is added by class. And when it comes to examining class, Kwang steadfastly refuses to do it. I mean, she just says, no, I don't want to talk about class, and shifts away from that. This was a problem that was very evident in Yellowface as well, and very evident in Babel as well. And I think that if this is something that doesn't really improve in Kwang's novels, it probably just shows that she's a writer who refuses to engage in anything outside of the echo chamber that she's stuck in. I think the reason why I have had so much to say about Katabasis is because this novel is not bad, but because this novel is genuine and is of substance. Nowadays, we see more and more novelists pump out novels that are really stock pictures, like copies of each other. You have Fourth Wing and 1,000 other romanticities. You've got Ali Hazelwood's romance books and 1,000 other romance fanfics that are now being adapted into novels. All of them are not very genuine. All of them lack the substance needed for discussions that not only enrich the reader but also enrich those who are listening to the reviewer speak about the books. And Kwang's Katabasis is a novel that does give you an enriching experience, and the word experience is how I would like to define it. It is something that you experience for yourself. You read the novel and you understand its nuances, its strengths and weaknesses. Like, we live in an era where novels are treated as commodities, and all authors are told to stick to this framework that enables them to sell as many copies as possible. And I feel like Kwang is in a position where she feels safe in her role as an accomplished writer to break away from that framework and tell the stories that lie in her area of interest, that are stories that she herself wants to tell, and that makes her novels good enough for the reader to have substantial conversations on, to have discussions on. This is a novel that I would really like you to read in a book club or with other people, because it demands you to read with your brain turned on. It demands that you discuss it and read every single page with interest, and I really love that about this novel. For me, it was like a 3.5 stars. It's a flawed novel, but it shines in spite of its flaws, and that's what I really like about it. I found it to be a good novel. Like, I would read it again if given the chance, and I find myself extremely lucky that I got the chance to read it before it was even published. 3.5 stars for me is a very high rating. You guys know that I'm a hater, right? My average rating is like 2.78, and it's because I read books very critically, because I love to read books, and from my love comes this sort of critical viewpoint where I only rate it high if I think it's perfect, and I'm a perfectionist, so I need it to be perfect, like in all senses. As someone who would read R.F. Kwang's grocery list and has read all of her novels, I would say Katabasis is like number 2 on my list of R.F. Kwang's novels. Number 1 is Babel, number 2 is Katabasis, number 3 is the entire Poppy War trilogy, because I read that when I was 13 and I don't remember anything from it. And the last one is Yellowface, because I just hate Yellowface with a burning passion. Anyways, in my opinion, saying that for like the upteenth time, in my opinion, Kwang is one of the most talented and genuine voices of the writers of her generation, and I'm quite excited to see what she does next. But I do hope that she improves, especially in the fields of writing, in the fields of messaging especially, because her messaging is not subtle at all. Like in Babel, she wanted to say colonialism is bad, so she did it in like every other page. In Katabasis, she wanted to say academia is hell, university is hell, and she did that too, like directly upon the page with no subtlety. I do hope that she reaches a modicum of subtlety and feels confident that people will not try to cancel her on Twitter, to write with a bit more nuance in her messaging. And that's probably all I have to say. I'm pretty much excited for whatever she writes next, and I guess that's just it for this video. I thought this video would be longer. I'm pretty sure it's like 20 minutes. You can call me a liar in the comments if it turns out to be much longer than that. But I quite enjoyed making this video, just as I quite enjoyed reading Katabasis. Anyways, I'm back from my hiatus of 2 months, which means I'll be posting many more videos. A sneak peek in the next video is that it's from a beloved franchise, a franchise that I talk about in almost every other video I make about fantasy novels. And it was published in March, so I read it immediately after its publication. If you can guess the book that I'm talking about, write it down in the comment. And if you enjoyed this video and want to discuss more about this novel, make sure to comment down below and I'll happily engage you in conversation. Make sure to like, share and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and hit the bell icon to not miss videos coming from me in the future. I hope you had a great time just as I did. Thank you for watching, be safe and bye bye.